And I think the best way to avoid them is to be ready to fight them at any time. And hopefully your adversary would recognize that you are strong enough to win. I think in retrospect, there might have been ways to avoid the Yom Kippur War. And I think the feeling of invincibility that Israel felt after the Six-Day War made the leadership and the people very, they felt euphoric, they felt superior. They looked down at their adversaries, and they did not realize that the Egyptian and Syrian have not forgotten and were going to fight until they get what they lost. And I think, unfortunately, the Israelis learned that lesson after that war. But there were ways in retrospect to avoid it. But the Arabs didn't make it easy. There was a Khartoum declaration that they will negotiate. They never offered peace for the land they wanted back. And I think both sides had to move to agree to coexist. And unfortunately, it was a very, very painful price to pay for both Arabs and Israelis. And there are many people in both countries, in all countries, who are fortunate to have survived the war, but they're still traumatized psychologically for life. You are never the same person after a war.
Absolutely.
I have learned that some Egyptians that are also very traumatized. I met some of them or their relatives over the years, and many of them did not actually get over it.
You talked about making an emotional contact with the Egyptian pilot that you cared for. Did you maintain a relationship with him after?
No, I tried to get in touch with him, but I couldn't. But I know of other Israelis who saved the Egyptian. And actually, there's a story of an Israeli reserve soldier who saved the life of an Egyptian. And the Egyptian actually tried to cut him and kill him after he was captured. But eventually it ended okay. And then they met again when he was working, the Israeli soldier, in a detention camp for Egyptian soldiers. And they renewed their acquaintance. And they have been friends since then. The Egyptian soldier died about 10 years ago. And the Israeli flew to Egypt to go to his funeral. It was that close a relationship that they developed. And you have to understand that in Israel, well, I can speak for myself and many of my friends, we never felt hatred towards the Egyptian because they did not kill the prisoners, except for some instances on the first couple of days. And even though they didn't give the prisoners that they called the best medical treatment, they did treat them. the video you could have seen the Israeli prisoners coming down from the aeroplane when they came back from Egypt. So I think it's not difficult for Israelis to feel positive toward them. I'm not sure about how the Egyptians feel. I think there was a lot of false information and incitement of anger and hatred toward Israel in many of the Arab countries. And that takes time to subside, but that's why there's really no peace between people, between Israel or Jordan or Egypt. Perhaps it will change over time. That's an unfortunate reality. The story with Syria is much worse because the Syrians were very cruel to the Israeli they caught, not only in the Yom Kippur War, but before. And it was known in Israel that if you happen to fall prisoner in the hand of the Syrian, you better kill yourself than do it. You can see this mentality even today, how they treat their own people savagely when they fight. You can only imagine what they did to Israelis that they captured. They didn't only kill many of them, but they desecrated their bodies, which is, for me, blasphemy. So I don't think there is that same relationship potential with Syria. But Israel has been very helpful to the Syrian people during the civil war and still is. The Israeli military built a large field hospital near the border, near Quneitra, on the Golan Heights, and they have taken care of almost 5,000 wounded Syrians without asking who they are. And actually, many of them with the complicated cases were sent to medical centers in Israel and then returned to Syria.
So I want to just call your attention to a question that Richard put in the chat. He wanted to know how the Israeli treatment of its wounded veterans compares to America's treatment of its wounded veterans.
I think that it was easier for us in Israel emotionally to get support. However, and there's no problem about treating people in acute injury or trauma. But for many years and even today, it was hard to get recognized as a PTSD survivor in Israel. The same was in the United States. And both countries have been gone a change in the attitude toward PTSD. I think in this sense, United States has been doing it quicker than Israel. And I can tell you that veterans, and that's from my personal experience, veterans in US that have PTSD are treated much better and very well in the system, including the VA. One of the major problems is the manpower. There are so many people with PTSD, and there are not as many medical providers that can do the work. But they don't turn away anyone. In the United States, I am more familiar with that than what is going on in Israel.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question if we have one.
I'll ask a question, please.
Sure. Thanks, Melinda.
Yes, so you spoke of the meeting place. Was that the meeting place for just medics? And were there certain meeting places for various units across Israel to assemble so quickly?
No, the meeting place is for everybody.
For everybody, okay.
My neighbors were coming, and we were at different places. The way it worked, they took us from the meeting place, buses or trucks,
I see.
to a general collecting area for the whole region. And then they divided us according to our units, which took about 2 hours. And then from that location, I went to my battalion. So there were 2 places, one a couple of blocks from my home, and the second one, an intermediary, which was like near, I lived in Rehovot. It was, if you know Israel, it was near the airport, near the place near the airport that we were sent there. But the whole thing took about 2 hours.
Wow.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Brooke. We're so grateful to have you with us tonight, and I'm even more grateful that you were able to help us with the technology. And my apologies for it not working initially the way that I had planned. But thank you so much. And certainly, if anyone wants more information about Dr. Brooke's books or anything like that, feel free to be in touch. And the Adult Ed Committee, I mean, many of the members of it are here. Our next event will be coming up not until November, I think. I believe we're going to have a book discussion on Daniel Pearl, or the book I Am Jewish, which was inspired by Daniel Pearl's last words. So if you're interested, please keep a lookout for that. Thank you, Dr. Brooke, and I hope everyone
Thank you, Doctor.
has a very wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brooke. Thank you.